Hi again, back, and we're going to look at modeling some of the details into the neck and around the jawline a little bit now, and getting the form of the sternomastoid muscle a little more clearly in our model. Um, one thing you may want to do to make this a little clearer, if you look at my model here in the perspective window, you can see that most of my lines are very thin blue, but the ones on the edge of the model are a thicker blue. And that is useful to help define points that are in the front and points that are in the back. If I look at this model from the front, it gets a little confusing to know which points are at the front of the face and which are at the back of the head. For example, if I select these 3 points and then go into my perspective view, you can see that I've selected a point here, a point here, and a point here. In the front view, they look like they're all side by side here, but if we look at them, they're actually spanning across the depth of the head. So to distinguish the front of the neck from the back of the neck, for example, it's easier to do if we have the border outlines of the head model highlighted a little bit, and you can do that by going into Display, Polygons, Custom Polygon Display, and turning on border edges here, and then setting the edge width to something like 3. I've already done that, so I can just close. Okay, so this tutorial is going to be a little bit different than the last one because I had names for all the points that we were moving around, but this time it gets too confusing, so we can't really name everything, so you'll just have to refer to these video tutorials to see what you're doing here. So let's try to rough in the form of the neck, and I'm going to be jumping back and forth between side, front, and perspective windows. So let's just take this point here and define the jawline a little more. Let's pull this one back, sort of towards gonion, to get that shape in a little bit more. Now let's pull the neck down a little bit. So select these 4 points here. So by selecting the side view, I get all 4 of these points. I just want to pull it down and back a little bit because I wanted to use this to help define my sternomastoid muscle here, which, as you know, or you know now, is a muscle that attaches to the mastoid process in the skull here and extends down to the clavicle, the sternum, where the sternum and the clavicle meet. It's the muscle that you use to turn your head one way or the other. But it's an important form to realize in the neck. So we're starting to get a little more form here. Let's look at these 4 points, and what we want to do now is to move these points in. You don't want to move this middle point because this always has to stay in the midline, because remember, we're going to duplicate the skull and reflect it, but we want to start moving these points in. So let's start with the middle, or the next one over. And I'm going to move this over. This is sort of defining the trachea here, so feel on your own neck your windpipe. And this one should be sort of close to the center, defining the middle ridge of your trachea or your windpipe. And I probably want to move this point over a little bit too. It doesn't have to necessarily go over as far. Just to rough in the neck. Now we don't have any data about the neck, but we may as well try and rough in sort of generic neck here. Grab this next point, move it over. This would sort of be equivalent to where your trachea goes into the rest of your neck, that loose line. Move this over a little bit. Now this point here we want to move over too, and this is going to define the line of our sternomastoid muscle. So you can see you get this flowing down here, and this is how this muscle flows. It flows from the lateral side around to the front, and attaches medially on where the sternum and the clavicle meet. So we can maybe move this one back a little bit and over. This could go over a little bit more. We want to select this point too. Now if we select this point, it looks like it's positioned properly here in this view. but obviously it's way too far out in this view, so we can move this in. Now you can see that my mesh is getting a little difficult to interpret from this side. Um, that's fine. We'll just have to build it gradually. If you get confused about what you're selecting, just select a point, jump into the perspective view, and you can see which point it is and where it should go. Obviously, these are all moved out a little too far, so we'll start to move these in a little bit. I can select all these points here, and maybe just move everything in a bit towards something like that. So you're starting to approximate the neck shape a little bit. This one's going to be more like this. So you have to keep looking at your model from multiple views. You can see we've got this big flat plane here, so let's try and round off the neck a little bit by selecting these 2 points, or oops, selecting these 2 points, moving them forward, moving them back in a little bit. So you can see we're getting a little more roundness in the neck here. And if we look at the side view here, we're starting to define another major muscle group here, the trapezius muscle. So we've got the sternomastoid muscle. Trapezius is, if you feel where your shoulders merge into your neck, that big triangular muscle is called your trapezius. So we can move these over a little bit. Start to get this kind of flow too. Maybe move this point over and in a little bit, flowing up into the head. So these points here are obviously too far out. These have to come in. So you can see that gradually we're building up the head. There's this kind of funny outlier point here. This is the chin, so we may want to drag this in a little bit. You can always pull these points down a little bit to extend the neck out. So you can see that I don't have enough resolution in here to get all of the form of the neck in, but I'll add that later on. You want to refine your major forms first before going ahead and adding more detail, and that's what we're going to do in the next tutorial. But this is, we're at a good point here where we've established the neck shape, added a little, I'm going to move this in a little bit here. Maybe pull this point out a tiny bit to flesh out the muscle a little bit more. Okay, so let's stop there, and next we'll go on to rounding out the head a little bit and adding some more detail into the neck. Thanks.